I said, hey, why did you buy the solution? And I didn't know what he was going to say. He looked at me and he said, you. And I said, what do you mean? Like the company that he said, no, we trusted you and we knew that you were going to take care of us.
Welcome to It Comes Down to This. Today's guest is Jessica Spillers, a digital transformation strategist who helps industrial companies activate their data in real time to drive smarter decisions. I've invited Jessica on the show because she's not just implementing systems. She's navigating the messy middle between leadership, IT, and operations to get them working together. In this episode, we talk about what it really takes to align data strategy across teams, why tech alone won't solve visibility issues, and how Jessica builds momentum for change in organizations that don't always move fast. In today's episode, it comes down to this. If your teams aren't aligned on the why, your tech will never deliver the how. Jessica, welcome to The Marketer. It's awesome to have you on the show. We're really happy that you've chosen to join us.
Well, thanks for asking me. I've never been on a podcast before, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, we're going to have a lot of fun. And I know we're going to have a great conversation. In this episode of The Marketer, we're going to dig deep into the art of selling something that isn't just a product, but it's more of an idea. And you happen to work for a company that builds software. And most of the time, people are coming to you with an idea, not a product already that's ready to go. So walk me through a little bit. Let's just give the audience a flavor for what that looks like. When people come to you or to your company, what are they looking for?
They're looking to solve business problems or technical challenges that they have. So they're not necessarily coming because they understand exactly what it is we can do, but they have these certain set of challenges that they would like to solve. So sometimes these are well-defined. Sometimes they're just ideas, not too well thought through. So it's really a process to discuss with them. Hey, what are you trying to do? When would you like to have it done by? Who's involved in the decision? To kind of understand, really, you have to get fairly intimate with them in terms of their goals as an organization and what it is, what problems they're trying to solve.
Fantastic. So with that being said, selling a product is straightforward. It is what it is. Here's what it is. Do you want it? Does it solve a problem for you or not? Right. But from your experience in sales, how do you approach selling something that's more abstract, like the idea or the product of some? Because it's easy when somebody's coming to you, I guess, if you would, where they're already there and they're saying, I have an idea, I want you to build this. But how do you go about sales when you don't know if people want to build an app? You don't know, kind of where they're at with business. Can you walk me through a little bit of your process and what you do?
I'd like to take just a little bit and go back to how I made the transition into selling ideas from products. So when I first went to sell, so I got an engineering degree, but I don't think I really understood what an engineer did. So I ended up in technical sales, which thank goodness. But I was selling control systems to manufacturers and drive systems and motor control centers and things like that. So what these things are, they have a particular function that they perform. And whenever you're looking for a programmable logic controller, like a PLC or something like that, everybody knows what a PLC does. You're going to use it to control various pieces of equipment in your facility, and everyone understands what that does. So as a salesperson, you're just differentiating on maybe services that you offer, the reputation of your company, the price, things like that, maybe the relationship that you have with them. But what you sell is really well understood. It's similar to, if you're going to buy a car, you know exactly what a car does and the function it's going to perform for you. So at that point, you're just trying to figure out, where can I get the best deal? Which car has the best tech, the best safety features, whatever it is you're looking for. And so I've been selling for about 20 years now. Halfway through my career, I switched gears and started working for a company who sold enterprise-wide software. So this software collected data from all the stuff I used to sell, like control systems and drive systems and things like that. But it put all that data into a repository, if you will, that would allow engineers, operators, other users of that data to be able to do whatever they wanted to with it to solve problems. And I had a mentor who had started the same way I did and who had made the transition to enterprise selling before I did, and he coached me and helped me. And honestly, it took a couple of years to really, and continues, to wrap your head around how do you establish credibility with someone fast enough that you can talk with them about their business goals and then quickly understand what your offering might be able to do for them. So it's tricky, and it required a lot of different skills that I didn't have before. So yeah, I would just start there maybe with, how I first started into this journey.
Well, I appreciate you backing up and starting there because I believe in mentorship. I think, if you're getting started in sales, I mean, I've been in sales for 30 years and I still think mentorship is important. It's good to have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of and that can, show you some new things. We're always learning, right? So let's talk a little bit, though, about what you just mentioned. Do you have a particular story or something that you could share with us um, in that process of how you learned this style of selling?
When I first started working for this company and I would go and talk to customers, and a lot of times I was fortunate enough that there was a lead or someone had called in and said, "Hey, I'm looking for," so I was selling an industrial historian that would, and what that means is just a repository that stores data, all the industrial data. And someone would call up and say, "Hey, I need a historian, come talk to me." So I'm thinking of this one situation. I went to talk to them, and it was just me and this other guy, and he's like, "Hey, we need a historian." And I'm like, "Okay, why?" you know and it's like, "Well, I don't know. I just users need to be able to access this data, and okay, well, what kind of access do they want for the data? What are they going to do with the data?" So a lot of times, of course, when you're selling, even if it's an enterprise software and it's an idea versus a product, you're not starting from a blank canvas. They know what ballpark you're in, right? They know, like, we're playing baseball, we're not playing soccer, or football or something like that. But from within there, a lot of times the customer doesn't really know exactly what it is they're looking for. They have an idea, but they don't. There's a wide range, right? Some do. They've conducted a study, they've hired consultants, and they know what they're looking for. But I find the vast majority are not really sure. They kind of have an inkling, and then your job is to kind of tease out that inkling, but also in a way that is not just about the person you're talking to, but the organization that you're trying to do business with. So it's more of like the whole team. So it's a really dynamic process. I made some notes here, some things I didn't want to forget about. And some things that I think are absolutely foundational in this is just, having an interest in other people and the business in which they're doing, really have that curiosity, that interest that's going to cause you to, not be annoying, but ask the right questions and try to tease that information out, and then actively listen to what they're saying, and make sure that you're confirming that, and then from there you can go. So I don't have a really cool story, but I'm in my mind, I'm sitting at this conference table across from this gentleman who said, "Hey, I need a historian." And I'm like, "Why?" And so then we start talking, and then we can come up with a few, like, sketch out a few ways that they would use the software or the idea, and then go from there. So, but I think it starts with, like, curiosity and interest in other people and their business and that sort of thing. That's really how you get to the what.
I totally agree with you. I think that's the cornerstone of it. And I'll tell you, I think that toddlers maybe are some of the greatest salespeople, since we were, before we jumped on talking about our, favorite childhood memories, because, what's one of the primary things that toddlers are always doing, and it's they ask why. And it's just like what you mentioned, it's the best word in sales, in my opinion, because when you're asking why, what you're doing is getting more information from the customer. And to your point, a lot of times a potential customer has an idea of where they want to go or what they want to have. They just haven't been asked why, or they haven't really kind of flushed that out in terms of what that would look like for them. Everybody has a sales journey, and it's, when you discover that you have a problem that you want to have solved, now you've got to go through this journey of figuring out how you're going to go about doing that, who's going to help you doing that, where you're going to buy, so on and so forth. So as salespeople, why is such an important question. Now, to your point, you're not going to ask it it's a lot of times like a toddler is going to repetitively, why? But the more you can active listen and pull out from that customer what that idea is, the better. And, for instance, my company, we do podcast marketing and sales. And lots of times when I'm talking with people, they'll have an interest in wanting to do a podcast, but haven't really flushed out what that podcast is. And that question of why is such an important one. And it really helps the client or the potential customer think through what they want their solution to be. Would you agree?
Absolutely, I do. And I love that you brought up the toddlers, because I was writing down some other things. I have a 4.5-year-old. She's not exactly a toddler anymore, but she is an amazing salesperson, and I don't think this is not her DNA exactly, but she just knows how to get what she wants, and I think one thing I wrote down that I think is important in the sales process, and don't let me take you too far off track, but when you think about a toddler, I know this is not true for everyone, but if you think about a toddler, the person they're asking all these questions to, why, is their parents, usually, typically, or someone they trust. And I think something I wrote down that's important in this process is to have true confidence when you're going to sell an idea, because there's a period of time from when you talk to the customer and you ask your first why until you get to the compelling reasons why you're going to continue your business relationship. There's a period of time that's a bit unknown, I guess, is a good way to put it. Like, you have to go through this process with a person, ask them enough questions to understand what they're trying to do, and then reflect that in a way back to them that communicates that your solution is going to help them with this problem. But this process, it only really works if you have what I'm calling true confidence. And so I think that that's something that toddlers bring to the table really well, because they're in a safe space and whatever they're asking, they're expecting a good outcome. And, I also think that it's the confidence part is important, because so many salespeople, you've seen this, I've seen this so many times, they just start what we call show up and throw up. You know, you're showing up, and then you just immediately start throwing up everything you can think of about your solution or what it is you want to do or whatever. It really does take confidence to be patient and ask the questions and start getting some information before you ever even start communicating about what it is you're trying to sell. So that's the other thing, it's the selling of an idea. It's a process that you walk with someone, and you have to be able to establish credibility. And I think in order to do that, you have to have, confidence. So I don't want to get you too far off, but I think that's an essential part. Yeah.
I love what you had to say about, that a toddler is asking a parent because there's a relationship there. They do have the confidence in the relationship. They have the trust, and they look at the parent as the expert and their authority. So therefore, it's easy for them to ask why. Another one-word question I think is extremely powerful in sales is how. And I think for salespeople and for marketing people as well that are listening to the show, if you can establish why and how, why is getting to the root of why somebody wants to do something. How is what they think it takes to accomplish it. And so, both from a marketing and a sales standpoint, getting to those root issues there is also critically important. But walk me through, Jessica, your process in terms of how this comes together for you. Let's say, you're meeting somebody for the first time. You're not just launching into why do you want to meet? What, why do you want to do what you're going to do? Back to the toddler with the parent, it does take a level of relationship, trust, expertise, and authority. How do you get to that point before you can start asking these questions and taking them on that journey?
Okay. And I do, though, want to come back to your how, because we can do that later. But I think you don't have a sell if you don't understand the how.
100%.
You have, and that's, to me, is where so many sales processes go wrong, is we don't understand the how. And we can talk more about that.
Yeah.
So one thing I wrote down is competence. So this is something that you can't really get around when you're trying to establish a relationship with someone for the first time. So, how do you establish competence? I think I have a couple of ideas about this, but one thing more old school that is important is, hey, look, before you go talk to someone, go learn a little bit about where they work, who they are. You don't have to get stalker level with this, but use the tools that you have to understand, so if you're talking to, I'm in Houston, so I work a lot with oil and gas companies, but hey, so is this an upstream oil and gas? Are these guys drilling for minerals? Are they transporting these minerals? Are they refining the minerals? Understanding a little bit about it, looking at the person on LinkedIn if you can, just trying to get a feel for who they are. You never want to, I used to work for a company that, a very, very good company, and they had analysts who their full-time job was just to analyze companies' 10K reports and financial reports and find everything. And so they really counseled us on, reading these reports and listening to investor calls and all this. Now, I thought a lot about it. I used to feel horribly guilty that I didn't read all the 10Ks of all my customers and listen to their investor calls. But the truth is, you can't walk into an organization and act like you're an expert on their business and their industry and everything that they're doing. So but you do have to strike a fine balance between, what do you do? And what is this? And, you need to understand enough to provide some credibility, but let them tell you the things that are important about their business. So I do feel one of the temptations that we have in sales is to pretend like we have this amazing business acumen and we understand everything the customer's trying to do, and we already understand it all. If you just tell me more, I'll take care of this for you. But it's really coming with a posture to a customer that I'm not going to waste your time. I've done enough homework here to understand like the basics, but you tell me. And it's really that posture, I think, that helps form a relationship.
I love what you had to say about research. I think a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people show up and throw up, they think it's all about the information that I've got to bring to the conversation.
Exactly.
Yet, so often what's missed there is, what do you know about the person before you even go into it? And I have found that every time I do research on the meeting that I'm going to have, and to the person or people that are going to be in the room, it always helps. You can tell a lot from somebody's LinkedIn profile, especially if they're posting content, right, that's of some kind of, personal value or whatever. You can get a sense for how people, for what their character is like, for, how they think and so on and so forth. And you can get a sense for their personality type in many cases from a LinkedIn profile. So if you are armed with that kind of information when you're going into it, what it does is help you establish that relationship much more quickly. And a lot of times, I think the mistake that people make in sales is they assume that the person that they're talking to is themselves, right? Like, you're just like me. So I'm going to talk to you just like how I would talk to
Right.
myself, and I'm going to communicate how I want to be
Right.
communicated with, right? As opposed to going, well, if I can put in a little bit of work here and understand who this person is, it's going to help me get to the why much more quickly in a way that's good for that person, as well
Exactly.
as then moving into the house. So I think that's excellent perspective. Let's jump back into that how component and how you move the conversation from why to the how.
Okay. Don't kill me, but I have a quick comment about that.
You don't
About the relationship piece. So doing the right amount of research and having the right posture when you go visit the person is essential for establishing a quick rapport. It's not going to be what carries you, throughout the whole relationship, but that's going to be essential for establishing rapport. I wrote down just one word because when you were talking, I was thinking about this one word, and it's care. You know, do you care about what you're trying to do more than you care about the person who's talking to you and what they're trying to do? And this care, this one word, in my opinion, it's really going to determine the success of the outcome. So there is a certain amount of qualification you have to do. Like, hey, is what you want to do something that I can help you with? Once you qualify that, to me, the care is what's going to determine. I had this one gentleman I was working with for the period of about a year, and he was a very stereotypical engineer. Never said anything, never did anything. He acted very uncomfortable when we were in a room together or a meeting. And even though it was, my first impression was that, well, he doesn't like me. He doesn't want to be near me. And so I was respectful of, maintaining like a respectful distance. But at the same time, I always was careful to acknowledge him, let him know he was heard. I cared about what he had to say. I cared about what his team had to say. And, he never indicated to me, he always acted the same. He retired somewhere in the middle of our project. And after that, he still continued to reach out to me to have lunch and to have coffee and, maintain a relationship. And I was just so shocked to find that he was appreciative of every way I had ever treated him or time I acknowledged him. So that word really matters. I think so many salespeople come with the idea that, well, I'm here to sell something to you. This is what I have to do. I have a
Mhm.
quota. My manager has told me I have to do this. I have to do that. And you just completely forget that, at the end of the day, you're still working with humans who,
Yeah.
have basic need to be heard and feel like they're an important part of the process. So I would be willing to stake that the success of a sale, a lot of times, if it's qualified, it depends on this aspect of how much do you care about what they're trying to do versus what you're trying to do. So anyway,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry about that. I'm happy to go back to the how.
No, I love that. I totally agree with you. And that just follows along the kind of the foundation of what we've been talking about here is relationship, right? And, somebody has to know that you care, not about yourself, but about them from a personal standpoint, as well as from a solution standpoint, that you're going to care for them. So I think it's excellent and well inserted. Thank you for doing that. But
I did, since you're big on stories, I did one time I was talking to this gentleman. He was the plant manager of a plant that we had sold a software solution to. And we had developed a friendship. And then as a company, we were trying to work on like making our message better and targeting people better. So, I asked him, I said, hey, why did you buy the solution? You know? And I didn't know what he was going to say. He looked at me and he said, you. And I said, what do you mean, like the company that he said, no, we trusted you and we knew that you were going to take care of us. And the solution, it did what we needed to do, but we picked it because we knew that you were going to take care of us and that if there was a problem that you were going to do your utmost to fix it. So I don't say that to like, way to go, Jessica, but it's like, it really does matter. I mean, I'm telling you, my experience has shown that really caring about the organization and the people you're working with really does impact the success of the sale.
Oh, without question it does. And thank you for sharing the story. I think, this episode is turning into a great episode for people to understand the power of relationship within sales using a couple of key components, your why and your how, but showing that care and that you are 100% correct. I mean, in most cases, what people are buying is the person that's sitting in front of them. And if they do trust you, you have so much greater of an opportunity to close that deal than if not. And, I think one of the ways to gain that trust is through something you mentioned earlier with that active listening. Active listening is not just sitting there and thinking, what am I going to say next? Well, how am I going to respond to this? It's active listening. I'm actively seeking you out. And I want to know more about you. I want to know more about the problem. I want to know more about what your needs are. And if I can understand those, that's why that why question is so important, because you may have to ask it a couple of times just to pull that information out. But I've also learned that people do like to talk about themselves. And if you can get on a personal level with somebody, that breaks down so many barriers, because it does establish that trust factor. I'll give you a little story of my own. We have a client, and they've been with us for a long time, and they're a fantastic client. But I was on a call, and the person was, we didn't know if they needed to make some changes in their account or if they needed to make some changes in the products and stuff. So, and like you, with this person, I've grown to be friends. But in this particular call, we were going to be talking about our services that they had purchased with us. But the call started out with me asking how this person is doing, and them sharing, well, I'm going through some difficult things. And so instead of moving off of that and focusing on my issue, I really leaned into that. And I asked this person to share, tell me what's going on. I'd like to hear, And they were open, and they started to open up and said, I haven't told anybody this except for you and two members of my family.
Right.
And it got into, it was a very emotional call. Right. And we spent most of the time talking about their issue. Right. The very last 10 minutes, basically.
Oh, no. I thought you said we only had 10 minutes. I was like,
no, sorry. The very last 10 minutes of my call with this person then dealt with business. The first 30 minutes was all relationship. Right. And, it was in essence kind of a sales call, even though they were still a client where we're going to be dealing with, their account. The more you can dig into people personally, with your why, with your how, the more successful you're going to be. So you were gonna come back and mention something about how, and I don't want to take that time away from you.
No, I will. But one word I wrote down while you were saying that is genuine. Okay, so we're not talking about faking care or faking a relationship in order for you to make a sale. We're talking about, being genuinely interested in others, genuinely listening to them, and genuinely caring. Now, that doesn't mean that, any relationship is based on, what I need and what you need. So a good relationship, the other person is going to know, hey, I'm a salesperson for this company. And so, even I genuinely care about you, but at the end of the day, I'm here to, do business or whatever. So we're not talking about, an ingenuine kind of relationship or something that takes over the entire thing. But I mean, my past is littered with people I've done business with, but now they're friends, but we're talking about a genuine thing, not something that you fake. Okay. So how you do these sales, why, but also how. To me, how really speaks to the essence of how, what is going to be done here. How are we going to get to the end? And in my mind, it's all about relationships as well. So, okay, say you called me in, I'm talking to you, but who is responsible for making the decision? Is it a committee decision, or is there another group responsible? What are the dynamics of that? Trying to understand how the entire decision is going to be made is a really important part of the process that takes time. And also some skills in, people are complicated, right? I mean, we have these motives that sometimes we're not even aware of. And sometimes the person you're talking to doesn't want to open up the situation to other people or allow you to have access to other people. And that can become a very challenging situation. But the more you ask, the more you're genuine in explaining, how the process is going to happen from your side, and understanding how the process is going to happen from their side. And that takes even more levels of relationship skills, and understanding not only relationships on your side, but relationships on their side. How do they work together? What kind of relationships do they have? And being sensitive to all of that, yet also confident enough to go ahead and advance the process in a way that doesn't damage your relationship. And all those things can be pretty tricky. So.
I had a mentor once that said, if you're selling something, you've already failed. And he said, what your job is to get them to talk about their why and their how enough that they sell themselves. And so I said, how in the world does that work? There's got to be a pitch at some point. There's got to, and he said, the question to ask is, how will you accomplish that? So if you're talking to somebody and you're asking them why they want to do something, and they're sharing with you what that is, the next question is, well, how will you accomplish that? And I thought that was really fascinating. It's so simple, right? But it works like a charm, because then they say they're either going to express how they're going to do it, or they're not going to know. If they don't know, that's your opportunity to start walking them through how they could solve it, right? Which then they've sold themselves, right? They see you as a solution. If they are going to, if they do give you an answer on that, you continue to ask them how, and then until they get to the point where they say, well, that's why you're here.
I love that, because that's not a trick. That's not like a gimmicky thing that you do. It's a question that gets to the heart of like why we're here, what we're doing, what's the purpose. And it also helps the person, think through things, and helps you understand the process. I've been in so many sales review calls or like deal review calls where it's like, oh, I'm just talking to this guy and he says we're gonna, he's gonna take care of it, and it's like, well, how, how is this? It's such a critical question. I don't think I've ever asked it like that, but we started the call off by saying, you're always learning. You should always be learning. And I think that's a question I would love to deploy more, is exactly, okay, well, how will this be accomplished? You're going to learn so much, like the timeline, who's involved, like what are the obstacles?
Right.
So it's like, that's such a great question. I love that.
Well, give it a shot because it works. And especially in your line of work where you're trying to sell
Mm-hmm.
something it works the best when what you're trying to sell is somewhat intangible, right?
Right.
When it's a service type of thing, um, just continuing to ask them the how question, just like a toddler will do, how do I do that? How do I do that? It, it opens them up to continue to share what their thoughts are. And nothing less, it's going to give you all the information about where they are within their sales journey, right? Because if you're asking them the why and why they want to do something, you're following it up with how are you going to accomplish it, they're going to tell you exactly where they are. There's not going to be any need to go, well, when are you going to buy? When you think you're going to know immediately where they're at. And what it does is it positions you to be in the position to provide the solution to help them through that journey, right? If they're still in the discovery phase, if they're still trying to figure out how they're going to solve it, now you can be the position of somebody that's going to help them take the next step. Well, let me send you
Mm-hmm.
this, or let me send you some
Right.
information, or let me,
Let's set up a conversation with the
mm-hmm,
folks
mm-hmm,
who know how to do that or whatever. Yeah,
exactly right.
there's a lot of different ways that as salespeople we go about finding that information, but that one question just like crystallizes so much of it.
Yeah.
I love that. We'll have to follow up and see how this works
I'm
moving
excited.
forward.
I'm excited to follow up with you and see how that works for you. I know you'll
Yeah.
be effective with it. What do you say, Jessica, to people who are listening to this and they're like, it doesn't take relationship to sell anything. People have a problem. They're looking into what their solution is. It's whether you can provide the solution or not. You don't have to have quote unquote relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about relationship here, we've been talking about like heavy relationship. Sometimes,
Yeah.
hey, let me dig into your personal life, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
How much relationship do you feel like it does take? Will you respond to people that are like, you don't have to have that level of relationship?
I think that in some regards, it could be proportional to the dollar amount, and the size of the project. So I'm just thinking about simple transactions, like say I'm wanting a cell phone. I need a new cell phone carrier, and I'm going and I don't need to get deep and personal with the person selling me that, but at the same time, if they seem genuinely interested in how I'm going to use my phone and how much money I can afford per month, and like they're open to have an open sort of caring, listening posture to me, I would more likely go with that person. And I'm thinking of when I wanted to go to grad school, and I kind of knew there were a couple of schools that I wanted to go to, and I applied to both of them. And the one I ended up accepting was the one where the dean of admissions called me up like just a day after I applied and was like, "Hey, tell me more about you." Like, it was so interested in, why I wanted to go to school, and basically like, tell me your whole life story, and just acted like it was the most interesting thing that he had ever heard. And, at that moment, I was like, that's where I'm going to school, you know? Um, so I think I remember hearing, it's probably been 10 or plus years ago, that there was this thing going around, oh, relationship selling is dead. I think there might have even been a book to that effect. And people were starting to, oh, relationship selling is dead. And I get the temptation. I get the temptation because relationships take time and there is no shortcutting real relationship. And if someone could figure out a way to get the same results without the relationship, gosh, it would save us all a lot of time, you know? And we could do lots more sales and just really crank out, the multi-million dollar deals all the time. But it's such an irony that this the multi-million dollar deals and the greater volume of sales comes by laying this real foundation that takes time, in which there's no shortcut. Um, I'm thinking about this one situation where we had worked with this company, and we had made it on the short list of technology, like software that they were going to use to solve their problem. And then we ended up winning that qualification. So we were getting ready to like start. And then I get a phone call one day that was like, hey, the CEO of this really powerful company that which we all would know if I said, he called me and he invited our whole team to Italy on this jet. And if we will just give him this amount of money, he personally guarantees he will oversee this entire project with this new software that they have. So I was like, you know what? I mean, that sounds like a smoking hot deal. I totally understand. I'm here if you need anything. And I continued to stay in touch with them. I mean, I just had regular touch points where I would just call, talk to them, ask them how the project was going, not in a creepy way or jealous way or like prying for information, but just, asking them. And they called me like 18 months later and said, hey, it's not working. Can you just send me over the proposal that you have before and let's just get this done? And like in a matter of like 4 days, we had done this huge deal, so like in reality, it took a long time, but you're always laying these foundations, and that kind of in a strange way, it multiplies, your reputation, the people they talk to say like, yeah, I would do business with her or that company or whatever. So it takes time, but there's no shortcut for it. And it has dividends that aren't logical. I guess what I'm trying to say, it's like, they're just not logical. You think like, if I spend all this time with this one person, I'm missing out running my fancy sales process in these other areas. But the truth is, it's like it's like, I'm not trying to sound like a weirdo here, but it's like you're sending these waves out into the universe and they come back to you in good ways, in ways that you can't explain by just running a sales process.
Well, I think what you had to say is absolutely the truth when it comes to relationship. How much relationship matters in sales is directly associated to the cost that's involved in the sale, right? Because the higher the cost, the longer the sales journey, right? The more people will be involved in the decision, the more research is going to be necessary. And the number one most important thing is the level of relationship that you have with the person that's going to provide the solution. If you're just going to go buy a cell phone, you're going to look at features and you're going to buy whatever suits your fancy, right? I mean, even though it's kind of a large cost, or a large cost, if you would, in terms of, products that you're going to buy, it's still, features cost. But when you move up into the neighborhood of, okay, this is going to be, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, now you're at a much different level. It's requires so much more. And relationship selling will never be dead. And
I don't think it will ever be dead.
no, it won't, because even if you're going to buy a cell phone, you're going to walk in and whoever you talk to, whoever starts talking to you about those features and everything else is going to play a part in whether or not you're going to buy that product based on whether or not you like that person or not, right?
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
And that person can influence you or discourage you away from that product. So this has been really such an insightful conversation and value.
Yeah.
Jessica, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Give me one piece of advice for a new person coming in sales. They've been given the playbook, if you would. It's just this kind of written, scripted process, right? Give me a piece of advice for that person of when to move away from that.
I'm sitting here thinking about, wow, like we're wrapping up. What else would I say? I mean, the playbook is one thing. You do need to understand that. You do need to understand your solution and the ins and outs. And there's a great deal of research and time that you should spend making sure you understand what it is you're selling. But at the end of the day, and we've been sitting here talking about these relationships and these great stories. And, the truth is it doesn't always go that well. I mean, even when you're trying to care about someone, you're trying to listen and all that, some people aren't open to having a relationship or sharing information with you. And, you know, the whole experience is a process in learning where you're getting better and you're learning to pivot. So I would say we've talked about caring about other people, being curious. That's so important. That translates to interest. And I would also say, being truthful, right? So just being truthful. There are situations where your solution is not going to be a fit for the problem that your customer is trying to solve. How can you, and work with other people to make sure you understand it's not going to be a solution or whatever. But being able to communicate that, like, hey, you told me these things. I don't feel that we're matched, and here's why. What do you think? And that is something that also establishes huge credibility. I'm thinking briefly of this time. I was a new salesperson with this enterprise software, and my customer asked me to do a quote, and I could go myself into the system and do a quote, but I didn't know what I was doing, and I messed it all up. And he knew I messed it all up because he'd been around the product a long time, and he told me, he was very upset. And I just said, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't handle this competently. I'm so sorry. I was like, let me go back and try to fix this and work with the people. And I apologize. And it's like he was a friend for life, like I didn't try to have pride or be defensive. I was truthful, And so I would say, be truthful, be true to yourself, be interested in others, be honest with your manager too, about the situations you're coming up against at work, and work this process. And I would also say to a salesperson, if you're in a situation where the pressure is so high and they're not respecting the aspect of the relationship and the sales process, then, have enough confidence in yourself to go find a sales organization where they are going to respect those things, So that'd probably be the biggest piece of advice.
Yeah.
I would have to someone who was like, I can't make this work. Well, maybe it's because the organization you're working for doesn't know how it works.
Such a great point.
Yeah. So that was kind of a lot of stuff, but
no, It's excellent advice, and the entire conversation has been tremendous advice. Thank you so much for coming on The Marketer. It was really a pleasure to get your insight. I'm sure if you're listening to this episode, you've gained a lot of value from it. So
I have.
Awesome. I have too. So till next time, thank you for joining The Marketer. We'll see you next time.